TipTalks.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut, or specifically TipTalks. This is a new show that I'm doing where I interview creative designers specifically in and around YouTube to see what it is that makes them tick. I'm joined today by Mysca of Overwatch Central. Hello Mysca.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Very, very glad to have you. We've worked on a few things together in the past,
Yes.
but things such as Yogscart, which is sort of a fan-made video game. But now you spend most of your time managing your own channel, Overwatch Central. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Mysca, or Marcus. I currently run a channel together with a friend of mine. The channel is called Overwatch Central. It's a channel based around Blizzard's new IP, Overwatch, and it's just everything Overwatch on there. Around start of October last year was when it started. So sort of built the brand. I make all the sort of graphics stuff around that, like all graphical assets and video editing as well to some degree. And I've done it for about a year. I've done it as a full-time job for roughly 6 months, almost 7 months actually. And it's been good fun. And before that I used to do a little bit of freelance graphics design and all that sort of stuff. So I've been a little bit all over the place, but everything's been based around YouTube to some degree.
YouTube is a great platform for this sort of thing. Now, you say you've been doing this full time for about 6 months, and your history obviously is in graphic design, but it's sort of spread around, a little bit of typography, a little bit of graphic design, lots of motion graphics, things like that. Obviously, you're in charge of pretty much the face of Overwatch Central and how it's viewed. So when did you first realize that you wanted to get into graphic design? Or rather, what led you to this point where you are now?
So I always loved YouTube right since the start. The first YouTube video I saw was downloaded on someone's really old cell phone. And it was the classic how to be a ninja video. So I saw that, and then I got in touch with sort of YouTube as a platform and started playing with it and watching videos and that sort of thing. And it was pretty early on. I started making channel art and that sort of stuff for friends that had their own YouTube channels, or even my own YouTube channel later on. And this was around in basically 2011 and 2012. And it was around here that I kind of learned the very basics of any image editor and that sort of thing. And I used to use web-based image editors, really terrible ones, just to make super basic stuff. And I had a lot of fun with that, and I learned everything as well through YouTube by just watching videos. I could watch videos and find new channels and sort of help friends out that had channels that I liked, and everything was basically YouTube. I did stuff for YouTube that I learned on YouTube.
Obviously, one of the biggest obstacles that you face as a YouTuber, I certainly know this, is actually a way to make it financially viable. That's obviously quite a big obstacle that you face on working as YouTube as your primary income. But what sort of other things did you have to struggle through? Obviously, the world is not in need at the moment of more graphic designers. It's quite a saturated market. Did you find it difficult to break through into the world?
Yeah, so probably from around 2011 to 2014, I made basically no money off of learning graphics design and doing it. Was just a hobby. I've always been studying as well throughout this whole time. I mean, I'm only 19 years old and I don't have any uni education or any courses or anything like that. I've just learned everything through YouTube. And I'm very fortunate to be in the position I am with YouTube right now, so I can keep doing this stuff. But on the way there's been a lot of things. And I would say the main one is definitely getting your initial network of contacts, and just networking as a whole is terribly difficult at the start because you don't know anyone. It's very hard to just find a random forum and start from there.
Absolutely,
what I kind of did is I watched a lot of Yogscast content. I got sort of involved in that community more and more, and did small things whatever I could basically do and help out with here and there. And that's how me and Matt got in touch. That was back in 2014, I believe, or 2013.
A couple of years ago now, certainly, yeah.
So I would definitely recommend starting where you're already comfortable. So if you have a side interest or something like that, then that can really help with getting that initial network of contacts. But that was incredibly difficult for me at the start. It took me about 4 years to build up a network of contacts that's decent. I mean, my network of contacts now I wouldn't say is really massive, but it definitely is better than it once was, and has grown rapidly over the last just half a year or so. But yeah, no, that's the challenge main challenge.
It is very true in that it's that old saying, if it's not what you know, it's who you know. And unfortunately, that is certainly the case. I mean, I obviously spent years at university studying media production, which is more towards films and the graphics and visual effects in films, before I realized that I actually wanted to move more towards the graphic design side of things and the animation side of things more than I actually wanted to make film. So I spent a good few years developing contacts within the industry that I didn't want to be in. However, the flip side of that, it does mean that it's not, once you're in and you can't change and adapt. I think especially nowadays as well, you need to be sort of multi-skilled in order to succeed in this sort of environment. And what that does, it does help you reach out to different types of contacts from all different walks of life.
That's something I'd actually like to point out as well, that having different skills all together, so you're kind of like your own sort of Swiss Army knife when it comes to design, is incredibly important to me. Because I basically started learning stuff because I was like, right, I want to do YouTube. I need some channel art, right? And instead of asking someone, hey, can you do this for me? You learn it yourself, and that's how you expand your toolkit. And also a lot of the time how you get to know more people, because you ask people like how you create certain type of imagery or compositions and so on. And yeah, that is definitely it both helps you learn but also connect with more people.
Yeah, I think you certainly need to have that sort of self-starting attitude if you do want to get going in the world of YouTube, in that rather than going, well, I don't know how to do this, so that's it. It's that idea of, well, maybe I could give it a go. I'll have a go at creating the channel art because that means it's done, and it's where you can move forward into the next place. Let's get into the meat of the meal then. Shall we talk about a few of your creative pieces? I asked you to bring along 2 or 3 pieces of work which you think would be useful for A, beginners to be able to analyse, and B, things that you're quite happy with the design process of. So should we dive into that?
Yeah, sure. Definitely. I've got 2 different things. It's only one that's actually like a piece on its own, but there are definitely some things then, and some like sort of basic advice and some stuff that clicked, when I worked on this stuff. So
let's dive into the rebirth thing first then. That seems like more of an entry point. You've basically provided here an overview of a project that you've created called Rebirth, and it's essentially a digital poster, if that makes sense. So there's elements in here of really, really great typographical design, layout and composition, balance as well in this piece is really, really good. Do you want to just take me through initially, A, what this is all about, and B, how your decisions on color and composition and design, and even things like what font you chose, how that influenced and why you chose those things in relation to this product specifically?
Yeah, for sure. So the reason as to why I picked this one was because there's nowadays there's some stuff in here that I would change, but back then this was like one of the biggest projects I worked on. It was a sort of launch design in general for a YouTube network, which was part of the Freedom Network. So it's like a smaller network where the point was that I handled most of the sort of launch related things that were around graphics and general brand. And I had, it was a pretty big project, and I worked on it for like 3 weeks in a row, and it was quite heavy work. But I learned a lot from it, and I did a lot of different things. And this was one of them, and probably one of the more important things, because like you said, this is more of a poster. So creating this, starting with the logo at the top, what I always do when I sort of create, if I'm creating a logo for something that's maybe a YouTube series or a side project, or even something like this, like a startup that doesn't need anything super complex, well, I go with that. I want one unique element. I want one font that it is mainly based around, like the whole brand. And then on top of that, I want one general feel, basically. So like, an element, a font, and like a feel. And for this one, I went with the whole sort of black, white, and orange theme that I used for Overwatch Central as well, to be honest. But it's a very, very basic design. You just go with black and white, and then you pick one color that you sort of want to be the main represented sort of palette in your pieces.
It makes it quite approachable as well. If you have one main color, rather than having a huge conglomeration of several, it makes it quite easy to access. It makes it feel like it's easy to approach and understand. There's that one point of focus that's like spread throughout the piece.
For sure. So another thing with this particular piece is that there was a lot of sort of logos and symbols and that sort of stuff that I wanted in icons, and that was important to get right. So one thing I learned in this piece definitely was Photoshop doesn't really have any laid out sort of title, subtitle, and just standard text or captions laid out for you. You just have to do that yourself and find your own formatting and that sort of thing. There are other programs that have that, but I'm a type of person, since I am self-taught most likely, that just uses Photoshop for everything. And probably way too much. I use it for absolutely everything all the time. I very rarely open up Illustrator.
Mm-hmm. I think there is one thing that beginners assume, is that you need to, this tool is for this, and this tool is for Y, and this tool is for Z, and that's not necessarily true. I know several designers like yourself, of course, that you say you work all the time in Photoshop when really you should, quote unquote, be using other tools. But the way I look at it as, if it gets the job done and it works for you, then it's not wrong.
No, for sure. And to give some perspective, this piece was about a year and a half ago. It was the summer of 2015. So it wasn't too long ago, but at the same time, these latest 2 years, I've learned a lot. So I've learned a lot since this piece as well. But yeah, this was a main. This was like an important thing to make for me, because I learned a lot about sort of typography and layout in Photoshop without having any sort of a template or anything like that. And I also learned how to bring out certain important aspects of it. So what I really wanted to do with this one, for example, that there is actually a fair bit of text in here for it to be an image, but I wanted to make it very easily to overview everything about the network and summarize a lot of info. And that's kind of like what infographics do a lot. And this is kind of in that same sort of genre. And an important thing for me was here that I knew that sponsorships would be an attractive part of this, and it was being developed a lot on this side. So I brought that out with its own sort of banner here, and it kind of splits off the poster in two as well, which makes the piece less repetitive, which I also think is very, very important.
It's an easy thing to slip into.
Yeah, when working with branding, you can't make it too repetitive, because people will get sick of seeing the same thing. If it's good, then sure, keep it. If it's like a really nice element, then just keep using it, and people will just be able to recognize the brand or whatever from it. But a lot of the time you need to make sure that you don't fall into the lazy sort of way of working and just being very repetitive with your methods.
It's absolutely a catch-22 in that you want to have obviously a central focus point of your brand. So you want that to be everywhere, but then you don't want to over-brand. And it's a trap that people classically fall into, is you find one idea that works and you stick with it. But looking at this as an overall theme, you can certainly see that there is this sort of, the orange is a theme that runs throughout and it works very, very well. But what you've used, orange in the background and these sort of flame bubble things, is a completely different use of orange than it is to bring out the focus points.
Yeah, and a very important thing, if you put a lot of text into whatever piece you're working on for whatever reason, I mean, there's a lot of different reasons for it, but whatever you do, make it easy to read it in a way that you don't really have to read it, so to say. And that's what I've tried to do here. A lot of the time, like, I haven't even, for example, right now, read the the smaller white text. I've just looked at the title, looked at the logos, and I know, right, music, they have this sort of stuff available. And like, if I want to know more, I can look into the white text and like the actual details of it. And that is very important when working with graphics, because in the end, if I was looking to make an extremely in-depth document for Rebirth, then I would not be making a graphics sort of piece from it. I would be writing like a Google document. You know?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's a key thing of graphic design. In the same way we're talking about that primary color earlier, you have your primary and secondary and tertiary colors here. In the same way, you also have that in text. You have your primary text that it is mandatory, that the viewer has to see and understand at a glance. And then underneath that, you have your tertiary and your secondary text, which is important to the details of understanding what's going on, but not important to A, the overall design, and B, the understanding of the message. And overall, it just does make a really pleasing sort of document. It's really, really great. However, I would like to move on to your main event, if possible.
Yes,
let's take a look at your current project that you're working on, your branding and sort of brand ideal for Overwatch Central.
Yeah, so this is a much, much bigger project than Rebirth was, obviously. For Rebirth, I did actually some stuff that was kind of similar to Overwatch Central in the way that I had to set up basic video sort of assets to use and effects and a general brand and branding guide and idea. But Overwatch Central is a much, much bigger project due to how long it's gone on for and how much more production rather than admin and management that it requires. So graphics and branding has been a big, big part of creating Overwatch Central. And now it is at its core just a YouTube channel that makes Overwatch content, just like any other channel for any game. Just picks a game, I like this game, I'm having fun with it, I'm gonna make videos on it, right? But right from the start, I made branding documents. I made a sort of rough plan of what content I wanted, and that was very important to me to stick true to the initial idea, so I wouldn't sort of lose my own sort of values for the channel along the way. And that very much comes through with branding as well, and that's why branding can be so important. I mean, anyone that looks at Windows logos over the last 15 years will realize that it's changed a lot, but at the same time they will realize that there is things that they keep consistent, that things that they stick to, and that they like both about a sort of system from a system UI design, but also just from a branding perspective. And that is very much important for me with Overwatch Central as well, as I wanted it to be a strong brand. And it was actually an opportunity, and what sort of spurred me to actually create it was that I wanted to create more. I wanted to create work for myself that could eventually be profitable, but I just wanted to be more active creatively, because it was towards the end of my high school period, and I wanted more. I wanted to do more. I assume that at least some of you listening or watching this will know that what Overwatch is like and what it sort of looks like. And even if you don't, a simple Google search, you'll see the Overwatch logo, and you can compare it to the Overwatch Central logo, and you'll instantly see that there is a resemblance, but it's also its own logo. So one very important thing for me was that I did not want to use the same font that they use for everything. I didn't want to copy their logos straight off, because I knew that after a while it would look generic, like you wouldn't look around on a page and have all those logos lined up for you and be able to tell them apart from just a quick, not even look at them, but just by seeing them in the corner of your eye. So I used like a slightly different shade of orange. I didn't use any sort of effects in the logo. It's just sort of, very sort of vector based, like it really is just a font and the very simplistic C logo in itself. And that was what I mainly wanted from it. I wanted a resemblance, but I also wanted it to be its own unique piece, and that's really what it became, together with the other focuses, and one of them being our pre-roll and the intro. And we've used that since the absolute first video on the channel. The first video on the channel is actually just this preview, and the preview for me was both a second chance for me to get back into motion graphics, which I really wanted to do. And it was also a bit of a challenge, because I knew that right from the start I wouldn't really have any licensed sound effects or anything. So all the stuff used in this video is unlicensed public domain sound effects from, I believe, freesound.org, and that is a website I've actually used a fair
that's something I'd like to talk about as well, actually. There's lots of people that come to me and they say, oh, well, I don't think I can make something great because I don't have a license to this wonderfully composed music, or I don't have any sound effects that I can use. But I like having to go out and hunt down things that aren't necessarily easy to grab, because if it's easy to grab and you've got an archive of sound effects that you can use, that's great, but it does get quite stale.
Yeah, it'll become generic very fast as well. So there's a lot of all the different sounds in the pre-roll as well. That was actually a lot of that wasn't actually how the sound effects sounded from the start. So I sped up and slowed down and stacked several sound effects on top of each other to create different sort of sounds, and that's why it is very unique in that way. It isn't just Cinema 4D templates from YouTube that look all the same, and that was important to me. But I was really happy with it when I made it. I didn't think that I would use it for like a year, but hey, we've used it for about 13 months now, and it's still going strong. So we're just gonna keep using it, basically. There are a lot of things that I've sort of iterated upon, though, and one of those things is our channel art. So our channel art is actually a different version of our logo. And you might be, at first, when you look at it, you're like, whoa, but those are like the exact same elements. And they are, but there is actually a lot of sort of smaller stuff that's been changed. So the logo on the left has a gradient on it to sort of give a little bit more depth to the image. The white text has the same effect as the white circle, just to sort of connect those two. And all of the orange bits are slightly sort of have a slight glow on them, and just a very simple gradient and stroke effects that just make them stand out a little bit. And what I like to do with, like, I do this with a lot of logos, with a lot of stuff that I've worked on. I just change them a little bit or add smaller effects to not have it be too plain. I just want to say that you're not always like allowed to do that. You know, sometimes you work on some piece with a logo and it'll say in your guidelines or whatever you sign that you can basically not iterate or change the logo. Like, it has to be on a plain background, easy to read, and no modifications to it. But with something like this, I really wanted to have a bit of a different look, a bit of a more sort of stylized look on the actual channel. So
I think that's a nice thing that comes with the freedom of creating your own content as well. You're only bound by the things that you impose on it. You're the one who creates the rules. But going back to these gradients that you've added, it's another thing that when you have your initial logo, you've only got, say, for example, 300 pixels to use on a standard YouTube channel logo, things like that. So you want that simplicity. You want the simple block colors. But when you've got a bit more room to work with, like in the channel art banners and things, it is a good idea to add in that extra content. You know, it's going to be larger, so you can afford to have these subtleties in the artwork that you can't usually have.
It's kind of like I like to look at it in the way that LOS or LOD systems in games. So basically, like, level of detail in games are getting closer to something in a game, and having that texture all of a sudden render at a higher resolution and that sort of stuff. I think it's the same thing with design. If you have something small, then work with that as if it was something like smaller on smaller res. And if you have something at a higher res, you definitely should put more detail into it, because you can. You
need to create artwork that is suitable for where it's being used. Which actually brings us nicely along to thumbnails. Now,
yes, exactly.
YouTube is, wow. Thumbnails are everything on YouTube. There's so much theory behind them. And I absolutely adore yours. I think the colors really, really pop. The backgrounds that you choose work really well against the colors. Say, for example, on the What Happened to Sombra, those purples and yellows just really, really pop, and it's great, and it grabs your eye. Do you want to talk a little bit about, the importance of an interesting thumbnail, especially on YouTube? But also definitely. What decisions you made on these ones that we've got here in front of us?
Yeah, so the thumbnails that you see like in front of you, and these sort of examples that I've picked as well, they are very much the sort of bread and butter of the sort of design work. Like I sometimes see, sometimes I'm in game and maybe someone recognizes my gamer like my in-game name, and instead of like saying, "Hey, I like your videos" or whatever, I get, "Hey, I like your thumbnails." Like it actually happens, and because like it wasn't intentional from the start. It was definitely not intentional. It just sort of happened over time. But it is something that I love making thumbnails. I absolutely love it. I have done it for a few other channels, and I'm gonna definitely keep doing it for at least Overwatch Central. And it is a lot of fun. And like you say, there are the philosophy behind thumbnails on YouTube is extensive, to say the least. There's a lot of people that say, "Hey, you should have like a face in the thumbnail because we can easily recognize faces, and we can easily like, just snap our vision to that thumbnail or that photo." And that's true, but there is also there are a lot of very important things around thumbnails. And like I said before, with the whole you're left with the canvas that is basically has to be very adaptive here. So you have to have some very sort of prominent and primary features of the image that can easily be spotted if it's just on a sort of
if it's a thumbnail.
If it's like 300 or 200 or even lower than that in like pixels wide, then you still have to be able to see what the text says, what the in our case the game logo Overwatch can be also important because to recognize. And even such things as the yellow borders on these thumbnails. And now the yellow borders here are actually kind of, it's a very small detail, but it's actually a bit of an interesting story. So I sort of accidentally made it or made that happen, at least on the bottom, I believe, on one of our thumbnails way back when. And I sort of started using it a little bit because I liked the way that it could contrast with the background a lot and sort of make the thumbnail pop a little bit more. And since then, I've seen it just be used more and more by not only myself, but also other like Overwatch or other content creators. And it is really fun to see. Like friends I know that make YouTube videos start using it because, and again, it's not something that I intended or that I'm like that I recommend using. It just sort of happened.
Some really great concepts have been born of accidents, but it sounds silly, like you say. It was born of an accident, and it's become this thing that people are even copying because they like it so much.
It is a very sort of weird thing, and it might sound crazy to say it first, but it is the one element that I like. If I look at a sort of thumbnail page, you have those related videos or suggested videos on the right side of a video on YouTube, and if all those videos have basically a photo and some text, and then one just has these yellow or any color like elements that stand out and that sort of make it pop a little bit more, then it actually helps a lot for getting the attention of whoever is browsing the site.
You need that unique identifier, and that really, it sounds simple, but there's something as simple as 2 yellow lines that just offset that image, especially if you're looking at a list of thumbnails stacked on top of each other.
Yes, okay? Exactly.
Those 2 yellow bars just make it stand out. It almost separates it from the page.
Thumbnails are tricky though, like they really are a lot harder to make than a lot of people realize, because what most people do, and what I did as well, and I definitely still do sometimes by mistake, and it's very easy to do, is that you put too much detail into a thumbnail. And that is the difficult part. You need to find a workflow that allows you to make them fairly fast, because you don't want it to take you 2 or 3 hours to make a thumbnail. And on top of that, you need to separate the elements that, basically, if I'm on my phone, the pixel density of my 1080p screen on my phone will be a lot higher than it is on my PC monitor, because you're looking at a 5-inch screen versus like a 25-inch screen.
Yeah.
And that is why, like, when people browse YouTube on their phone, they will notice these details a little bit more, at least in their subscription feed, because the thumbnails are pretty big and they have the pixel density is incredibly high. But if you're looking at this on PC and they're just these suggested videos next to the video, I mean, if you're on YouTube right now, you can see them next to the video. They really won't be very large. So you need to separate your background elements from your foreground elements. And then you need to make those foreground elements primary elements that are visible when they're almost any resolution. Thumbnails a very, very important part of like how I sort of progressed. Like I've made a lot of thumbnails, not only for Overwatch Central, but for other people as well. And I think it's one of those things that they will always be needed on YouTube. And with YouTube growing so much as well, it's just an incredibly important aspect of the site. And it can be a lot of fun to do and to mess around with.
So your Twitch scenes are very, very minimal, I found. Is that a conscious decision?
Yes, definitely. As you can see, I use the same general effects and elements that our YouTube banner art uses for at least the offline, sort of the other scenes, and not the main in-game one. And that is very to me, it's important to just get the message across, and you don't want too much stuff in there, because ideally you're not supposed to show that screen a lot. So putting a lot of design effort into stuff like that is basically pointless, because your goal is not to show those images. Your goal is to show those images as little as possible. And then when I have something like an overlay, it becomes a lot trickier to work with. So I made a fair bit of overlays for mainly esports events, but also for various streamers, and also myself, as you can see here. And there are a few things that are incredibly important to think about when making overlays. And to begin with, you need to list your elements that you really need for the overlay. So in our case, we have 1 or 2 webcams. We have our most recent subscriber on Twitch, and we have our top donator of the day. Now, the reason as to why we have those is because we want to incentivize people subscribing and donating and so on, which is important. But more importantly, it's not really there for us, but it's also there for the viewers. People keep watching. And that's why those are incredibly important. But on top of that, they shouldn't be in the way, because people are here to watch us play a game and not watch people donate money or subscribe to the Twitch channel. And that's why everything needs to be exactly the right size, no bigger, no smaller. You need to be able to see the text on like a mobile device, and you need to be able to read it properly on there. You need to be able to read it on a PC, like when you're just watching it in a smaller window, a bigger window, full screen. It doesn't need to be too big. And that is an incredibly standard mistake, that people make text too big on anything that has to do with overlays. It happens a lot on Twitch. If you full screen something after you're done with working on a design, you can very easily sort of tell if the text is too big or not. It'll be pretty easy for you to to tell. You just have to get a feel for it, really, because in the end, it's kind of like UI and UX design.
Yeah, very really difficult and different kettle of fish as well. But I think that's a pretty important point about full screening. When you're working on something, you're using half of your screen space to work on it, and you'll be zooming in and out to 1,000%, back to 10% whilst working on it. So taking a step back every now and then and viewing it at the size that it's going to be used at is a really, really important step, because it makes you understand, not as a designer if it's working, but as a viewer if it's working.
Yeah, and that is in the end the very important thing when making anything that is for YouTube, Twitch, live streaming in general, just social media as a whole. Like, you need to really see it where it's going to be used, basically. Another thing where this is also very sort of common is when it comes to any promotional stuff on Twitter. People like to use promo images on Twitter because when people see an image in their Twitter feed, they're very likely to click it rather than just read a tweet.
Absolutely. No one likes blocks of text.
Yeah, easy eye grabbing and just the very sort of important features. But yeah, that's basically what our Twitch overlay comes down to as well. There's been some iterations of it, but I like to keep it simple. It's nothing like brilliant or absolutely fantastic, but I do see a lot of people make very sort of basic mistakes when it comes to creating overlays on Twitch. And a lot of the time it comes down to that they have too much text or too much in general. Yeah, you definitely don't want too much stuff. And as you can see, like I've done with the webcams here as well, that if you have a webcam or so and you want a label on it, don't put it like away from the webcam. Just use the space that you've already taken up with it. You want to do that like as much as you possibly can, because or else you have you don't connect the pieces, basically.
Absolutely. You're just wasting screen space. Yeah
exactly. So it's simple, but there are just some key principles behind it for sure.
And I think that is something to take away, is that it's okay to change your designs. It's okay to have iterations, because if you have a strong enough brand guideline, like you say, you started before you even started making content for this channel, you got your brand guidelines straight and you said, these are the colors I'm going to use, this is the font, this is the overall design aspects that I'm going for, so that when you change and make new iterations of things, it still has that basic theme behind it, so it doesn't look out of place.
Yeah, exactly.
Just before we go then, what advice, if any, would you give to graphic designers that want to not necessarily dive into YouTube, but just dive into graphic design in general? You're obviously quite a young man yourself, a few years younger than I, and you've created a huge success for yourself in the past couple of years. And I just want to try and get all the knowledge out of you that I can.
Like I mentioned, that's like one of the main obstacles is about contacts and networking. And one thing that is very important there is that there is very rarely someone that you get in touch with that can't help you with anything else than whatever piece they ask you to make or so on. They will know people, they will have a circle of friends like that might need other types of graphics work made for them. So like anyone that you meet, anyone that you get in touch with, like talk with them, like learn things from them, and keep growing your network basically from that one person. And there is a lot more that you can sort of get out of it than just one job or whatever. I have a lot of the time I sort of do rounds, or used to it at least. This was a while ago, but maybe a year ago was the latest time where I just sort of did a bit of a round through my Skype contacts and wanted to get back in touch with some people and also see if there was any work I could do. And I ended up getting a lot of work from just asking 2 or 3 people that then connected me with more and more people. So that helps a lot. And on top of that, like we said not very long ago, but less is more a lot of the time. And so keep it simple, but make sure that whatever you're delivering to your client, that they're happy with it. Because what I do a lot of the time is that I sort of give them sort of progress images as I progress with it that are very low res. So they get an idea of what they're going to get, and they can tell me if I'm going to redo something or if I need to redo something, rather than have me work really hard on something that I'm happy with, but they aren't happy with.
I think that's a key point. It's communication, isn't it? And also setting clear guidelines when you start. If you make sure that the client has an understanding of what they want, because sometimes they don't.
Yeah, a lot of the time they don't, in my experience. It's tricky. It's very tricky.
It is very, very tricky. It is probably the hardest part of graphic design. But like you say, the most important. Networking and keeping it simple.
Yeah, that sums it up.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Mysca. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. And thank you for your help kicking off TipTalks.
Yeah, not a problem. Anytime.
And to my viewers as well, thank you very, very much for watching. And hopefully I will see you all next time. Goodbye.